Hey Book Dragons, I'm so glad that you've joined me on the channel today. I recently finished reading The King Killing Queen by Shawn Speman and the companion graphic novel The Briar Sword Monk. I'm here to do a book review of these today. Now, if you are not familiar with Shawn Speman, Shawn is the web druid, as he's called, for Terry Brooks, and I believe also for Naomi Novik. He manages both of their websites. He's also an author himself, and quite a good one, I might add. I have read other books of his in the past. The Darkthorn was the first book I read from him, and then I've read some of his short stories as well. I really like his writing, and so I was really excited to see this book come out. I got this through a Kickstarter that he did for the book and the companion graphic novel, and he recently did one for a re-release of The Darkthorn as well, with new cover art and revised inner text and everything. So I'm really excited to get that one. So that's kind of the short version of my journey with Shawn Speman. I met him in person. He's just a really great guy. So I hope you'll check out other books of his, but this video is specifically to talk about these books. So let me give you a little taste of what the story is about. This is set in a medieval style high fantasy setting. It is a version of our world, and it is bordered by the world of Anun, which is the Fae realm. And for countless years, the Fae and humans have been warring against each other, and at one point in that history, during a major battle, they were finally able to come to peaceful terms, and a covenant was signed between the Fae and humans. And you might be interested to know that this is also Arthurian. The ancestors of the humans in this world are the Pendragon family, Arthur being the most famous, of course. Merlin Emrys, or Merlin as he's more commonly known, is name-dropped several times in this story as well. So it's kind of cool to see a world that is a unique world unto itself, but it incorporates the ancestry of the Pendragon family and the history of Camelot and things like that. So I thought that was really cool that he blended that into this world of his. So now let's talk about the King Killing Queen itself. What is it about? And I'm not going to go into too many details. This is going to be a spoiler-free review. But essentially, the High King Alafair Good is dying, and all of his family is surrounding him, all of his heirs. They are, of course, assuming that one of them will be chosen as his successor, as the new High King, or possibly High Queen. And King Alafair is well loved in this world because he conquered many of the warring factions in the human world and brought a lasting peace, and he has survived a fairly extended lifespan because a spell was put on him by a witch, causing him to not be able to be killed by normal means, and so the only thing that he can die from is a natural death. Even though his life has been extended and prolonged, at some point his body's going to give out, and that is what is happening at the beginning of this book. And so he's got all of his children around him. He's got his brother there with him, and his brother is kind of the chronicler of the kingdom, and he's taken on an apprentice named Sylviana, who is working to become the next official chronicler of the kingdom when he passes on. And so they are there at the High King's deathbed as well. And after a long discussion about what makes a good king, the king eventually names his successor, and to the shock and awe of everyone in attendance, it is not at all who anybody thought it might be. And so now, after all that, High King Alafair Good is dead. Long live the High Queen. And I'm not going to tell you who it is. I want you to read the book and find out. But it is definitely a shocker, and it causes divisions among all the siblings. And the Fae realm is involved too, because part of the agreement between the Fae and the humans is that the Fae send an emissary to be connected to the High Ruler, whoever it is, a king or a queen. They have to send an emissary that will be there to watch over the new ruler of the humans, and also partly to make sure that they do not go back on the original agreements set forth in the covenant between the humans and Fae. So there's a whole political structure and scheme that's going on throughout this book, and it's really, really excellently done. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed most of the characters. I enjoyed the magic that was presented in the story. There's a couple magic swords in the story, which I thought was really cool. And like I said before, I really liked the ties to Arthurian legend as well. That really gave a depth and a history to the story that you might not get otherwise. And it is also connected to other books that Shawn has written, like The Dark Thorn. So I loved to see how all that tied in, and it makes me really curious to read more. Now, you might be wondering what the Briar Sword Monk is and how that ties into the story. There is a point in The King Killing Queen where they have kind of a story time of sorts. I know that's not really an appealing way to say it, but I don't want to spoil too much, so I can't say exactly how it happens. But during that story time, they talk about the history of what happened with the Briar Sword Monk. And the Briar Sword plays a major role in creating the covenant between humans and Fae. So, guys, I would like to take this opportunity real quick to shout out my patrons. I really appreciate all of your support for the channel. And if there are those of you out there that have been thinking about supporting me and you would like to do so, you can click the link in the description below. And there are some great perks that you can get by becoming a patron, like getting early videos from me, getting your name in a drawing to pick books for me to read every quarter, and also discounts on merge. So if you're interested, that's great. You can join my Patreon today. And now let's get back to the review. When the new High Queen is trying to figure out the history and how it plays into the new rule that she is supposed to take on, somebody is kind enough to recount to her the story of the Briar Sword Monk. So you get a little section in the book that talks about that, and that is really cool. But what I like about this is it presents a couple of different pictures than you get in The King Killing Queen, okay? Because you're getting one perspective in The King Killing Queen, and then you're getting a different perspective in this book. It's still mostly the same story, but a little bit different perspective. And another thing that's really cool about this is the first part of it, if I can get it here, is a graphic novel. So it's a graphic novel about the Briar Sword Monk and what happened to create the covenant between Fae and humans. But then you're getting the prose version as well after the graphic novel. What's interesting to me is you're going to get a little bit different information in the prose version than you do in the graphic novel version. Every retelling of that story is a little bit different. It really speaks to the fact that as history moves on and we write history books about it and things like that, the story can change slightly and maybe mean something a little bit different than it did when the events actually happened. So I thought that was a really cool way to present that story to us and kind of let us judge for ourselves what we think actually happened versus what we're told happened. And it kind of makes you wonder, is the High Queen getting the full story? Because as the book comes to a close, she gets a very personal experience of what happened in the Briar Sword Monk. And that's all I'm going to say. Just a tease for you. I know I'm teasing you, but you definitely need to read the King Killing Queen, and you need to read the Briar Sword Monk. I highly recommend reading both of them. I do believe this is still available for purchase from most major book markets. You may not be able to get this specific edition, like a fancy hardback edition of it, but I believe it is available. So I've told you already that I liked the characters, I liked some of the magic that was presented. Is there anything that I didn't like? Yes, there are a couple of things. There were times in the book where the titles of characters in the book were repeated. Instead of just calling them by their first name, they're called by their full title numerous times in the book, and that got a little old for me. I'm like, okay, I already know who the character is. I know they're the High Queen. You don't need to call them by their full title. And maybe that's a way of showing respect to the characters in the book. And that's fine. I totally get that, and I respect that, but it did feel a little overdone. After a few times of hearing the full title of Alifair Good, High King Alifair Good, that appears numerous times in the book, I'm like, okay, I know who he is. We can move on now. But that's okay. It's not a major deal. It's just a little nitpick I have. The other thing that kind of bothered me is it has a very abrupt cliffhanger. When you get to the end of the book, you are not at the end of the story. And it is abundantly clear that you are not at the end of the story. So that left me a little bit disappointed because it means I have to wait. And I don't mind waiting. That's fine. But I didn't feel any sense of closure. It felt like I was watching a TV show that just ends on a big cliffhanger, and now I have to wait for season 2. So I do kind of wish that there had been some type of closure. There wasn't. And that's okay. I'll just wait until the next book comes out. He does say at the end of this book that there's going to be another book. So I look forward to reading that. He did introduce a very well-known character at the end of The King Killing Queen. And that's all I'm going to say. So now let's talk about my rating. I give this a huge thumbs up. I really liked the book. I didn't love it because of some of those things I mentioned, but I really, really liked it. It was such a great book. I definitely recommend reading it. Please check out Shawn Speakman's books in general. He's a very good writer, a great storyteller, and I think you would really enjoy it, especially if you like stuff set in a kind of Arthurian world. If you like Arthurian tales like I do, you're going to feel right at home. So that's about it for my review. Let me know what you think about The King Killing Queen and The Briar Sword Monk. Do they sound like books that you would like to read? Have you read them already? They're really underrated, not talked about a lot. So I will be very happy to hear of anyone in the comments that has read these books. Have you read Shawn Speakman in general? I would like to know that as well. Until next time, guys, make sure you read more books, and I will talk to you very soon.